So our speaker will now have the floor until about 7 p.m., at which point we'll open the meeting for discussion. So now, would you please help us welcome our speaker for this series, taking us through all 15 weeks of our Big Book study, from the Charlestown Beach meeting down in Charlestown, Rhode Island, John M.
I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name is John. Grateful to be here tonight. Once again, it's an honor and a privilege to do this. I feel truly honored. We give away our life to keep it, and this is just a small fraction of that in my life, but it's a huge fraction. Nothing so much fills my heart like intensive work with other alcoholics, going one-on-one through this book of Alcoholics Anonymous, going through the 12 steps, but man, this is close to it. I feel honored to do this, and glory to the almighty triune God, and may his words speak clearly through me. His words, not mine. So there is a solution, right? I love on page 17, the tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree. There's no disagreement. It's right in this book. The 12 steps are laid out, upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. When I invite that guy over to my house and he sits across from the kitchen table, we're joining in this brotherly and harmonious action. He's helping me more than I'm helping him. It says that in the literature later on. But it's so true, because I get out of all of my worries for the day, my business dealings, how this claim isn't going right, and this adjuster's treating me wrong, and this lawyer is up my butt, and all this stuff is happening, and I'm in the moment with him, and we're talking about God, and we're talking about the solution. I get outside of my mind. That's a great place to be for a real alcoholic. The mind's the problem. It talks about it, and there's a solution. We're going to get to that tonight. When they talk about the Titanic analogy, what they're talking about is the Titanic. The Titanic wasn't far off from this event, or this book was written, in the 30s or something like that. And they're giving the shipwreck analogy, right? We're in this boat. It goes down. Joyousness, camaraderie pervade the captain's table from steerage. So like we're joining them, we're grabbing put them on the lifeboat, put the life jacket on them. Right, and we save from disaster. They hit shore, they go their individual ways. But that common peril that we have is alcoholism. That hurt of alcoholism, the hopelessness, the body allergy, the mental obsession, and all that. Right, we can laugh, like when I'm across the kitchen table with a new guy that I'm working with, we can laugh about these humorous events that happen. That, like if I talked about how I crashed my car into a tree when I was 17 off Kinney Ave in Narragansett, people wouldn't be laughing. The normal people wouldn't be laughing. Like if I told that story to my grandmother, who's 95, I don't know how much longer she'd be around for. No, I don't. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's just like the language of the heart, one alcoholic with another. I love how there is a solution, has those 12-step concepts laid into it in the beginning of it. But that in and of itself can't hold us, right? But that, what does it say on page, that second to last paragraph, bottom of 17? But that in and of itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. What holds us together? The common solution, the brotherly and harmonious action, the power of God, right? I can't skirt away from that in Alcoholics Anonymous. I tried my best to avoid that notion. Sure, I'd give it lip service. I believe in God. When I came in, when I was 18 or 19, or like when I come back off a relapse shortly thereafter. How you doing, John? Oh yeah, sure, I'm praying. I'm sure I might have said a prayer like 3 days ago. But I wasn't really willing to join in brotherly and harmonious action. Sure, I chose that sponsor that had a cool, flashy car and used to make hooch in his jail cell in, the Palm Beach County Jail. I thought that was real cool. But I stopped calling him that week after. I was unwilling to really look at myself. But I love, like I said, I love how they talk about 12-step concepts in there, page 18 and 19. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, that brings us to God, who is properly armed with the facts about himself. Have I done a thorough fourth step? Have I withheld nothing? Is there still stuff I'm going to my grave with? If not, then I'm properly armed with the facts about myself. If I share that with a fifth step, and I've done all that withholding nothing to God and to another human being, because God's going to speak through that man, or if you're a woman, that woman, or whatever. That's been my experience when, we light that candle and we go to town, and these little remarks. Do you notice this pattern here? Do you notice how self-centeredness is manifesting in that part? Yeah. Then you start really knowing about the facts about yourself. And listen, it's not about knowledge. We know that. Self-knowledge is not going to get me sober. Clear, got it. But that experience with God will. And he infuses that into our hearts. Opinion, take it or leave it. Opinions don't matter in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what I believe. I guess it is based on experience because that's what I've lived and that's what I've seen. I can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished, right? So if I don't really know the alcohol game, am I really going to develop any rapport? I talked about this before. I'm in business. I'm in sales. I've been in sales for 20 years. I own my own business now. I just signed a contract today. A lot of my business is about sales. We got to develop a business rapport. They have to trust what I believe in and what I'm talking about, that I understand that I can represent them adequately and the service goes along. It's the same thing with Alcoholics Anonymous. When I'm sitting across from a new guy and we're having a conversation, he's got to realize that I really live this, or what's the point? He's not going to want anything that I have. A lot of that really emanates, though. God emanates from us. The Holy Ghost emanates from us when we really live this. And I've done this before, right? I can tell, and it's no fault, like no shade on them. You have your own path, buddy. I'll tell you the truth in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I can tell real quickly if someone has multiple years and they've never gone through this book and never written a fifth step, never done any amends. I can tell within a minute. And listen, no shade of their own. I'm not judging them, but it comes across really quickly. Why? Because I got to have an entire confidence. Why? We read later on that the man who is making the approach has the same difficulty, has had it. He obviously knows what he's talking about. His whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he's a man with a real answer. So I just share with, we're going to get to this and working with others, but they give us a glimmer of 12-step concepts in here and I love this little short, brief thing. I try to live my Alcoholics Anonymous life by that paragraph. I don't know if you guys can relate to that, where it's just like when I'm talking to a newcomer, I'm just like, yeah, this is what I experienced. I tell them a little bit about the mechanics of the body allergy. This is how, I can't stop drinking. This is how I want to stay stopped, but I can't. This is the hopeless feature. I share with them some humorous escapades that happen, to crashing cars and jail cell stints and all this stuff and running from the cops and something that they might relate to because that's where they're at currently. So they know, they can believe that I have that rapport. They believe what I'm talking about. And it's true. I have that, and I've lived that. That they have no attitude holier than thou, nothing whatever except a sincere desire to be helpful. Listen, I talk about God a lot, but I make a hell of a lot of mistakes every day, every hour. I hope I don't. I hope I can achieve sainthood. I hope I can be a saint one day. I pray that happens. I pray a rosary every day. I want that to happen. I want to live in the path of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and I want to run towards the cross and not away from it. But wow, it's a hard road to run. But listen, I'm broken. I tell the newcomer, I'm like, yo, I'm broken. I make mistakes every day. Right? Can you take my hand and can we walk this path? And listen, I talk about religious concepts in here, and I want to be clear on this. I respect our traditions, but I've been shown the truth, and I'm not going to shy away from this. In the fourth step, it talks about it in the fear inventory. We don't apologize to our God to anybody. And that's how I live my life. In Alcoholics or not, I've gotten a lot of shade from people in Alcoholics Anonymous because of that. I don't care. Because ultimately, when I die, I'm accountable to him, not to you, not to him. And listen, you can have a power greater than yourself, whatever. I'm talking about my power, the true and living God. I'm going to talk about it. I'm not going to shy away. Nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. It's just like, I'm just there to be helpful. Like, that's it. Like, I've never charged a sponsee once. I own a insurance business, right? I have no formal training as a recovery coach. I've never worked in the recovery sphere, not once a day in my life. That's cool if you do, right? But I just try to live by this paragraph. I do this in my spare time. It's an avocation. I don't charge anybody. Like all of you do, I would assume too, right? I mean, like in Alcoholics Anonymous. I just want to be helpful. Why? Because I'm paying back that debt that man did in Newport for me when he brought me over to his house off Man Ave, and he sat with me on Thursday nights when nobody wanted to be around me. And I had little to no friends at that point. He showed me that brotherly love, that harmonious action that we just talked about. But just sitting in his dining room and going through this book, he just read this book to me. He didn't even explain anything to me. He gave me a packet, but I felt the love of God, and I saw selflessness, and I saw the face of God in that man. So the mechanics of the big book doesn't matter. I'm clear. Like, I diverge from a lot of big book guys on that. This has no meaning, this book, honestly. If you just use it as an inspirational book, mechanics don't matter. It's about intent. We read about it tonight, right? We read about spiritual experience. Joey brought us to that. Right? We just have to be honest, open, and willing. If I do that with my recovery, God is not going to let us down. This book ain't getting me sober. It's the power of God. Believe that. So the mechanics don't matter. Now, listen, in my experience, as time goes on, years down the line, maybe a year or two, they might matter. You might want to get with somebody like that can really explain this book to you. But in the beginning, it's just about getting through it, man. And getting to that power, harnessing that power that is God. That's all that matters. Because I get nobody sober. I've never gotten somebody sober. I think I've maybe had like 3 sponsees out of hundreds of guys that I've worked with that are actually sober today. Maybe. So I know it's not me. I have an abysmal track record. It's not because it's not me. It's the power of God that gets them sober. I'm just a conduit. You want to take my hand and walk with me? Let's do it. Are you open to this concept? Just like in this book, right? We read about it tonight, and I really harp on this a lot because it's important. The hopeless feature of alcoholism. A lot of people don't bring that up in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's littered through the book. We read about it tonight, right? How do we get there for you? Are you getting there from this book? Right? The doctor talks about with Roland H. No, he didn't want to be named in this book, but he was a hopeless case, right? No people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. We become free men and women. We become changed. Just like the end of the 3rd step, we were reborn. God does that for us. But I got to cooperate with his grace. But for the grace of God, we read that later on page 25. There is this, top of 25, but for the grace of God. There have been 1,000 more convincing demonstrations. But for the grace of God, for sure, it's a grace, but I got to correspond with that grace. I got to get in that canoe. I got to grab that paddle, and I got to start paddling. There's a concept that people that I respect in Alcoholics Anonymous talk about chop wood and carry water. I gotta get down. I gotta get that wood. I gotta chop it. I gotta bring it over the wood pile. I gotta grab that water. I gotta carry it. It's the same thing with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. What's God's will for the real alcoholic in Alcoholics Anonymous is to do the 12 steps, because that opens me up and I see the truth and the power. Like when I'm off the back of a men's up in college and I'm in Iowa to go to my girlfriend's friend's wedding, and I'm driving from the airport in Des Moines up to Algona, And I've never been to the Midwest before, and I am off the back of these amends, and I'm just feeling lit up from God. Like, I'm in a whole nother plane. Yeah, fourth dimension of existence for sure. And I'm in the car, and I'm just seeing the cornfields. And like, normally, right, people are like, cornfields, whatever, but I felt so moved by the beauty of nature and seeing God's creation. I was crying. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen before. I have to correspond with His grace. Do you think I would have been open to that? Maybe a month or two before, and I hadn't done those amends, and I hadn't been in that amends process, I would have been like, Iowa? You kidding me? There's no way I'm going there. And then if I do go there begrudgingly, I'm going to make it all about me, and I'm going to go past that same cornfield on that same road and be like, this is boring. Two different perspectives right there. One filled with self, one filled with God. Oh, I love 20 and 21. They start breaking down. You want to ruffle some feathers in Alcoholics Anonymous? Talk about page 20 and 21. The moderate drinker, the hard drinker, and the real alcoholic. Do that in a middle of the road meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going to ruffle some feathers. But listen, the truth is that I got to know this if I'm a newcomer, because maybe I'm just a moderate drinker, maybe I'm a hard drinker, and maybe I don't need Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe I need some sort of heavy psychology, or I need a rehab, or I need, like, there are many different things that I may need. It might be a human power. The real alcoholic is beyond human aid. So I got to understand this. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have a good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Like my dad, I'd consider a moderate drinker, right? He used to drink a lot when I was younger, but he moderates now. He literally has one drink. He just doesn't want to drink a lot anymore. I don't know if his body can't handle it or anything, but he moderates. Or he can stop entirely for periods of time. It's like, I look at him, I'm like, how can you do that? Don't you remember when we were 24, we're on your dinghy in Potter's Pond, and we were drinking like a 20 or 30 pack to the head, and then we'd go to the oyster bar and then drink all night, and it, like, what happened? He's not built like me, he's different. He can give it up and leave it alone. He can moderate or stop all completely. No issues. It's all good. Now we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome. It may even need medical attention. I remember when, I think it was my second or third sponsor broke that down. I was like blown away. Crazy. It's like changed my whole outlook. And like, I'll give you an example. So I went to college with a guy. Since this is going online, I'm not going to say his name. We'll call him Richard. That's not his real name. But, he used to drink just like, I thought he was worse than me when we were up at school. I went to a big drinking school. It was number 8 college, party college in the country. And it was like a college of like 5,000 kids. So, I mean, we got down. And he used to drink all around the clock. And he would get in trouble. He'd get arrested. And that point of my sobriety, I was able to manage it. I don't know if it was the heavy if it was the cocaine I was doing or whatever. Sorry, I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous, but I thought I could moderate. I wasn't moderating. I was doing something else and drinking the same amount. But we can't separate the true from the false sometimes. But I would judge. I'd just be like, man, he's got a problem. Guys, you notice how he's got a problem? And he got out of school. He got a really good job. He was working in sales, and he wanted to focus on his job. So, and like he could not draw sober breath in college. And I went out with him in Providence, and he had one Budweiser. I go, hey, what's going on today? Why are you just having one tonight? He was drinking water, and he was like, well, I'm focusing on my career. And I felt immense resentment. You know, like, I can't describe it any other way. I was like, how can you get away with this? I just felt demoralized, honestly. I'm just like, and I was like, oh, good for you. But inside I was seething. So he had the habit badly enough to gradually impair him mentally and physically. He was getting in trouble in college and all that. What became a sufficiently strong reason? It wasn't falling in love, it was successful business career. That became operative. That was his number one goal before anything. See, his willpower is still there. He was able to moderate and have that one Budweiser. And he'd been doing that for a year or something prior. I don't know if he's still doing that. We lost contact, but he's the hard drinker. He ain't built like me. But what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. And I think Dan F., when he was in here, and I stayed, I think, on the first one, he was talking about how when he read the doctor's opinion for the first time, he was like, this is me completely. For me, when I was in rehab, and I read this book when I was 18 or 19, when I first got exposed to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that first meeting came into Juno Beach. I went to the halfway house in Lake Park, but the actual inpatient was actually in Juno Beach. And an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting came in, and then I read this book. And we read, There's a Solution, page 21. Here is a fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredibly tragic things while drinking. I felt like I knew completely. When I read that paragraph, it's a long paragraph, I was like, okay, I guess I'm an alcoholic. I can relate to 95% and identify with everything in there. He does absurd, incredibly tragic things while drinking. Yep, my life. And I was 19 at the time, 18. I was a baby. No, I think I was 18. I was a baby. He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah, my personality did not resemble when I was sober to when I was drunk. I was always insanely drunk. Always. I had all these crazy nicknames. The Cuss King, Johnny Blaze. And, I was just, they made a character out of my alcoholism and my drug addiction. I had this whole persona. The Cuss King, John Blaze. I was the party, the clown. I played the clown role. You want to know what actor role that I played, whether willingly or unwillingly, sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly? I was a clown. People laughed at me. That's what my alcoholism took me, and I embraced that role. Because it's hard to be taken serious when you're doing all these incredibly tragic things and absurd things, like this paragraph talks about. I wonder why I could never keep a girlfriend and they never took me seriously. They get rid of me after a couple of weeks. Or why no employer really wanted me, or I'd be scared that I'd get fired by the second month and I'd quit. Then I'd start looking, oh, what's going on, John? Oh, I quit. But here's my dad's giving me the help wanted ads. You better start looking for a job, Okay, on to the next one. Fear drives me too, right? Moving on, 23. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem the alcoholic centered in his mind rather than his body. If you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. So, if alcohol is a problem, I drink beyond my control, why don't I just stay stopped permanently? Why can't I just remember when? I go into a lot of meetings before and they just be like, listen, remember when, hold on to that seat of that chair, grit your teeth, and remember when, and be on guard, when the book literally tells you something different. Their reaction might be a little different to alcohol than I am. Do you get the pattern here? Sometimes there aren't real alcoholics in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's okay. I'm glad they're here. Right? Because alcoholism can progress even when you're dry and sober. We read that and more about alcoholism with the young chap with the business aspirations. We got sober at 25. We'll get into that next week. But the problem is because I could just stay stopped on my own willpower, but The book says the willpower avails me nothing. I get it. My willpower literally did nothing for me. So therefore, the problem centers in my mind rather than my body. The mind takes me back to the thing that kills me. My mind's my problem. The mind doesn't help me with anything to stay stopped permanently. And I had some real wants and needs to stay stopped based on maybe legal ramifications and like mom and job employers and all that. And I just always drank again, no matter what. Always drank again. Even in Alcoholics Anonymous, I shared with you the story of leaving the meeting in Newport and then going to Aquidneck Liquors and drinking after 3 months of sobriety, being in a halfway house at 2 months removed from alcohol. Somebody comes in with a bottle of vodka. I don't even think about the terrific consequences. I don't think about the legal ramifications. And I'm just like, ooh, vodka, I like vodka, let's drink. Like, you'd have to be crazy. You'd have to be insane. Well, guess what? That's insanity for alcoholics. That's what it's defined as. The mind fails out on me, and then I drink after a brief period of sobriety. The problem centers in my mind, and that brings me to a state of hopelessness, where I'm on 24, and I'm at the bar, and I am literally living this paragraph. I'm going to go on for a little bit more. I'm compelled to do that. Sorry, guys. So, or perhaps he doesn't think so at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sake, how did I ever get started again? Only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop after the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow? And like in the beginning of that paragraph, I skipped over it, said, it won't burn me this time. So here's how, literally. So like, I remember the story. I was in an Alcoholics Anonymous at the time. It was one of my times outside of the program, trying to figure out some way it's going to work this time. So I had this job selling uniforms, and I'm back at the place doing cold calls on the phone. And I swore off drinking before I went in there because I was on a bender for 3 or 4 days. I had a really rough night at the Ocean Mist. I had a write-up plan. It was coming. I knew it was coming. I knew I was probably going to get fired soon. I got to actually go into work the next day. So I go into work at 12 because I was on the road all day. And my buddy Jay is like, hey, we're going to Bo's Billiards. It was in the same building as this company. And I'm like, there's no way I'm drinking tonight, Jay. I can't do it. I got the write-up plan coming. So we had this little like old school analog clock in our sales office with no windows. And I pound the phone and then I look up and it was 3 o'clock. And I'm like, well, maybe I could have a tall Narragansett and get away with it. 5 o'clock rolls on. I'm walking over to Bo's Billiards. I sit on the seat and I say, let me have that tall Narragansett. And in my head, I'm like, well, maybe in this nonchalant way, it won't burn me this time. And then I'm 6 beers deep in. And I'm telling you the truth, this actually happened. And I didn't even know the book really that much at this time. And I pounded on the bar and I'm like, I can't believe this happened again. And then it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm leaving Dockside in East Greenwich, or Harborside, the old Harborside in East Greenwich, with one eye open, driving home back to South Kingstown, being like, it happened again. Utter demoralization. "25, there's a solution." Now they're going to talk to us about what the solution is. There's a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. So it's actually a requirement. Right? We hear in Alcoholics Anonymous, well, these are mere suggestions. The book's telling me something differently. Leveling of our pride. You get that in steps 4 through 5, a little bit in 7, definitely in step 9. The confession of shortcomings, when you share that fifth step openly with somebody, that's a requirement for successful consummation. What's consummation? When Christ is on the cross, he says, it is consummated. When he's on the cross and he breathes his last breath and he lets go of the ghost. What does consummated mean? It is finished. So in order for it to be finished, I have to do all these things. And they're not mere suggestions or requirements. And my experience shows that, like, it wasn't until I was able to actually do this and God gave me the grace and I corresponded with his grace and I start making these amends and I do all the step work and all that, that actually it worked. Then I'm past the 3-month lip. And now I'm like a year in and I can't believe it. Glory to God, right? That's the requirement. Why didn't it happen 5 years prior or whenever it was when I was leaving that rehab? I never wanted to go that deeply. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, towards our fellows, towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish these things for which we could never do for ourselves. On good days when I'm spiritually fit, I hope I live my life like that. And that's what God's done for me. I'm able to live life successfully when I don't get in the way because I'm the problem. And I live a pretty good life today because I've been reborn through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and most importantly, God. Thank you, guys.